Doesn't make sense. He's a billionaire from New York, no less, and everything he sits on is gold. How could he possibly connect with the common man? And yet he keeps winning more of them. Trump got trounced by black voters in 2016, so he brought in some muscle from the West Coast, someone he knows black men love, Kim Kardashian. Democrats used to own Silicon Valley, those California do-gooder liberals who wanted to save the planet. Yeah, right. Trump came along and said, regulations? We don't need no stinking regulations. Not only did he win them over, in his second inauguration, they were all sitting up on the stage with him. There was an entire section that looked like the full range of the autism spectrum. It's by a coalition of little things that hit people personally. Trump gets this. He feels your pain in the ass. Kamala ran on democracy, which is the most important issue. But without the political skill to sell it, it added up to nothing. Meanwhile, Trump was running on...
The moment Bill Maher confronted Democrats' crumbling strategy on live television, it landed like a seismic shock across the political landscape. For years, party elites operated under the illusion that top-down messaging automatically secured voter loyalty, but Maher cut through the facade with surgical precision. The system has grown dangerously detached from the very electorate it claims to serve. Calmly and analytically, he traced a pattern of overconfidence, misreading public sentiment, and mistaking cultural signaling for genuine connection. Data from recent exit polls and demographic shifts reveal a steady erosion of support among key voter groups, men under 50, rural constituencies, and working-class independents, a decline that intensifies whenever ideological performance overshadows pragmatic engagement. The villain wasn't ideology itself, it was arrogance, detachment, and the quiet collapse of strategy left unchecked. Psychologically, voters detect authenticity versus manufactured performance, real people versus rhetoric, and when messaging feels staged, resistance builds subtly but inexorably. Maher's warning extended beyond tactics. Assuming applause in the echo chamber translates to real-world votes risks more than defeat, it risks the slow erosion of credibility itself. And the haunting reflection lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. When the party stops listening, who remains to hear it?
Forgets. It's only hypocrisy if you had other beliefs to begin with. In his first term, he signed an executive order banning TikTok and then got trounced by young voters. So in 24, he campaigned on saving it. And apparently every Tide Pod eater responded because his youth vote was up 21%. In his first term, he called cryptocurrency not money and based on thin air and said it seems like a scam. And who better to know a scam? Well, that was then. Now he's on more coins than Julius Caesar.
When Bill Maher turned his lens on Democrats' faltering approach, it wasn't mere criticism, it was a surgical expose of systemic disconnect. The party, he argued, has blurred the line between moral signaling and effective persuasion, treating public sentiment as a stage to be managed rather than a terrain to be navigated. According to data from recent election cycles, trust among suburban swing voters, particularly those who prioritize pragmatic solutions over ideological purity, has steadily eroded. Defenders might claim that steadfast principles energize the base, a point with merit, yet Maher framed the unraveling as preventable, a failure to align messaging with lived experience. Psychologically, voters respond to authenticity, not engineered narratives. The gap between perception and reality breeds quiet but powerful disengagement. The long-term consequence is unmistakable. A party that misreads the electorate risks turning loyalists into skeptics and casual voters into passive observers. Maher cast himself as the truth-teller confronting a system that mistakes echo chamber applause for real-world validation, leaving a warning that echoes far beyond the next election. Strategy without comprehension is a march toward obsolescence.
Those California do-gooder liberals who wanted to save the planet. Yeah, right. Trump came along and said, regulations? We don't need no stinking regulations. Not only did he win them over, in his second inauguration, they were all sitting up on the stage with him. There was an entire section that looked like the full range of the autism spectrum.
The real shock of Bill Maher's commentary wasn't dissent, it was audacity. On live television, he cast Democrats as prisoners of their own messaging machine, where identity signaling and moral posturing had eclipsed genuine connection with voters. According to voting trends and demographic analysis, suburban and rural constituencies increasingly perceive the party as disconnected from economic realities and everyday concerns, even as elite discourse lauds ideological purity. Calmly and surgically, Maher distinguished between principle and performance, the chasm between authentic engagement and staged virtue. Psychologically, audiences respond instantly. When a party speaks at them rather than with them, skepticism grows quietly but relentlessly. Maher's warning isn't confined to a single election. If perception continues to override persuasion, the consequence isn't merely lost seats, it's a sustained erosion of credibility. As the broadcast ended, the lingering reflection remained unmistakable. Can the party reclaim authenticity before the distance becomes irreversible?
Make it snow more? No, but elections are won on the margins by a coalition of little things that hit people personally. Trump gets this. He feels your pain in the ass. Kamala ran on democracy, which is the most important issue. But without the political skill to sell it, it added up to nothing. Meanwhile, Trump was running on, I'll make the poop go down. He never shut up about bad shower pressure, shitty light bulbs, and low-flow toilets.
Bill Maher tore into the narrative of inevitability that has lulled Democratic strategists into a dangerous complacency. The party, he argued, mistakes media applause for voter trust, assuming favorable headlines and celebrity endorsements can replace genuine connection with the electorate. Calm and surgical, he pointed to data from exit polls showing enthusiasm among core demographics stagnating or declining, while Republican turnout surges in pivotal swing states. Defenders insist that mobilizing the base through identity and progressive messaging is vital, a point with merit, but Maher framed the danger structurally. When messaging becomes performative rather than persuasive, victories risk being hollow and collapse looms unseen. Psychologically, voters sense the gap between rhetoric and reality, quietly eroding confidence. If this pattern persists, Maher warned, Democrats face more than electoral setbacks. They risk ceding cultural and political authority to opponents who understand authenticity better than empty messaging. And the lingering reflection remains. When performance overtakes persuasion, who will listen when it truly matters?
Ask not what your country can do for you, but for some little niche group, it was all that mattered. He's right. It shouldn't take 2 flushes to make my shit go away. That's my guy, YMCA. People say, it doesn't make sense. He's a billionaire, from New York no less, and everything he sits on is gold. How could he possibly connect with the common man? And yet he keeps winning more of them. Trump got trounced by black voters in 2016, so he brought in some muscle from the West Coast, someone he knows black men love, Kim Kardashian.
The strategic critique Maher offered was rooted in timing as much as tactics. Democrats, he said, have repeatedly misread the electorate in a period of shifting demographics and evolving political priorities. According to demographic studies and voting trends, Millennial and Gen Z voters are more fluid than conventional wisdom assumes, responsive to authenticity and practical solutions rather than performative ideological alignment. Calmly, Maher contrasted this reality with party strategy, noting a repeated tendency to over-prioritize signaling over policy substance. Defenders argue that energizing the progressive base is crucial, a counterpoint with merit, but Maher emphasized the psychological danger. Voters detect when they are being spoken at, not spoken with, and that perception diminishes trust faster than any policy failure. The long-term consequence, he warned, is not merely lost elections but a deepening erosion of cultural authority that allows the opposition to define the narrative unchallenged. His reflection was pointed. Power is fleeting when it's assumed rather than earned.
Which scaled back restrictions on felons, a connection he built on in 2024 by becoming one. And then he pardoned Lil Wayne and pardoned Kodak Black and the CEO of Jay-Z's company, and the founder of Death Row Records, and the former mayor of Detroit. So it's not surprising that Kanye, and Wayne, and Chris Brown, and Amber Rose, and Snoop, and DaBaby all talked him up. That last one out of professional courtesy.
Maher framed the party's messaging failure as a systemic misalignment between performance and reality. Democrats, he argued, have created a theater of virtue that often ignores the electorate's nuanced priorities. According to exit polls and demographic research, key swing voters increasingly perceive the party as out of touch, particularly in regions where economic and cultural anxieties intersect. The calm, surgical observation is stark. Messaging that prioritizes signaling over substance alienates precisely those voters whose support is essential. The counterpoint exists. Bold moral positions can energize a base, and historically movements have succeeded by mobilizing ideological conviction. Yet Maher's point was strategic. Persuasion requires dialogue, not monologue, and authenticity cannot be faked. Psychologically, the electorate senses the difference between real engagement and manufactured performance, people versus performance, and acts accordingly. If the pattern continues, the party risks transforming short-term enthusiasm into long-term disengagement, leaving opponents to capitalize on credibility and cultural authority.
Not even close, but he doubled what he got in 2020, and in places like Philly, Detroit, and Milwaukee, that was the difference. And now he's going to do it with pot. Finally, he got around.
The essence of Maher's critique was a warning about complacency and hubris. Democrats, he suggested, have allowed elite consensus to substitute for voter insight, assuming that policy wonks and media approval are proxies for popular understanding. Calmly, he traced the data. Suburban voters, rural independents, and working-class constituencies have steadily migrated away from the party's preferred narrative over multiple election cycles. Defenders argue that principled messaging is essential for long-term ideological coherence, a valid counterpoint, but Maher highlighted the structural risk. When a party speaks primarily to itself, influence contracts and relevance fades. Psychologically, voters reject messaging that feels performative or condescending, responding instead to authenticity and tangible outcomes. The long-term trend is clear. Disconnect breeds disengagement, disengagement erodes turnout, and erosion opens space for the opposition to dominate the narrative. Maher's reflection was unambiguous. Understanding the electorate is a prerequisite for strategy, or the party forfeits both votes and credibility.
It's a very key appointment in the most important city in the country, which is also our financial center. It matters that the mayor stands by, and I assume stands with, someone who says things like, if you don't believe in the government's sacred right to seize private property, it's over. Seize private property. Home ownership is racist. Elect more.
Maher dissected the role of cultural perception in electoral collapse. Democrats, he argued, have become entangled in a feedback loop where elite applause is mistaken for popular approval, a trap that grows more dangerous as political polarization intensifies. Calmly and analytically, he cited demographic and exit poll data showing stagnation among key constituencies and declines in engagement among casual voters. Defenders of current strategy argue that mobilizing the base through identity-driven messaging is critical, a counterpoint with merit, but Maher framed the risk as existential. When perception substitutes for understanding, messaging loses resonance. Psychologically, voters respond to narratives that feel lived and relatable. When they detect artificiality, trust erodes. If the party continues down this path, the long-term consequence may not be just electoral defeat but a sustained credibility gap, leaving opponents free to define political reality on their terms. The reflection he left behind was chilling. A party that misreads its own stage may find the audience silently walking away.
It's private property. Home ownership is racist. Elect more communists. Private property, especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy. Really? Even among the 20 million black Americans who own their own home? I mean, these are the kind of utterances I might forgive as something a dumb white girl said while she was at Bryn Mawr. Because it's the kind of privilege hating you can only learn for $95,000 a year. But these are statements made as an adult. Yes, for co-eds from elite private colleges, you're only a lesbian until graduation, but the communism lasts a lifetime.
The most piercing element of Maher's commentary was his focus on psychological resonance. Democrats, he suggested, have overinvested in messaging designed to signal virtue rather than communicate shared experience. Data from communication research confirms a clear pattern. Audiences reject manufactured authenticity and reward genuine engagement. Calmly, Maher highlighted that the party's reliance on cultural signaling over practical storytelling has created a widening gap between perception and reality. Defenders argue that ideological consistency energizes the base, a valid point, but Maher framed the risk strategically. When messaging feels performed rather than lived, influence erodes and credibility declines. Psychologically, voters detect the difference between people and performance, real versus staged, and act on it. The long-term trend is sobering. A party that confuses applause with alignment may find its power evaporating quietly, leaving the opposition to define the terms of cultural and political authority. In the closing analysis, Maher's intervention wasn't merely critique, it was a strategic warning about institutional survival. Democrats, he argued, cannot assume authority. They must earn it through authentic connection and careful listening. Long-term trends in voting behavior, demographic shifts, and public opinion all signal the same pattern. Trust is fragile, and misreading the electorate carries consequences that compound over multiple cycles. Defenders of current strategy argue that principled messaging establishes coherence and identity, a counterpoint with merit, but Maher emphasized the ultimate reality. When the party prioritizes performance over persuasion, the cultural and electoral gap widens, and authority dissipates. Psychologically, voters respond first to authenticity, then to policy, and when messaging feels staged, even compelling proposals struggle to resonate. The final reflection he left behind was stark yet instructive. Power without connection is temporary, and a party that ignores the audience risks losing not just elections, but its voice in the national narrative.
Democrats seem to be having this debate whether or not Maher Mamdani is a socialist or a democratic socialist. Let me settle it. He's a straight-up communist. How do I know this? Well, I'm reading between the lines when one of his major advisors says, elect more communists.